Grand Rising, everyone. How are you doing today? And today, we will be discussing a very controversial topic, okay? But I want to at least thank you all so much for your patience and my inability to be here last week. But we are here today, and I'm going to continue with the same subject, the same topic. We're going to be talking about does God have a gender, right? And the reason why I want to go into that is because one thing that you see is that when it comes to the Most High or the higher power, many people, they either have made a decision on what they believe the truth is, or they haven't made a decision and they're kind of just going with the flow of things. But most times, one thing that is consistent, whether they have made a decision or they haven't, the pronouns that they tend to use is he. So, rather than me just coming out telling you that God is a she, I like to prove things to you or provide information for you to come up with your own decision, okay? Or just give you an idea about how you can draw your own conclusion in the most objective manner, right? So we're going to be looking at, we're going to discover how God has a particular gender, right? Because again, the argument may be, well, it's either God is a man or God doesn't have a gender, right? God doesn't have a gender, and God is just energy, right? Which is technically true. God is energy. Energy is everywhere. We all understand this. But if God had a gender in the personified version of God, which we did speak about before, if you haven't attended my classes before, you would know we spoke about the unmanifested form and the manifested form. So there is both, right? Because how did we get here if not, right? So when it comes to that, it's more like, well, we are discussing the manifested form, or how did we get here, basically, as images or children of God. How did we get here? How did we come to be man and woman, and where did that all come from? Okay, so we're going to begin with just discovering God's gender identity through the analysis of human gender identity. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. In this class, I did put a trigger warning. Okay, I did put a trigger warning if you have seen that and you're trying to figure out what that is. I did that simply because this class is a discovery of truth. Okay, and I understand that the word in itself, the word truth, when it comes to sex or gender identity, is a touchy topic for people. Like when you say truth in regards to that, because most people will be like, well, what's your truth, right? That's why we have the language of what is your pronouns, I would like to identify you appropriately, and things like that. So being that we're in this particular time, I want to attempt to clearly explain what's going on right now in our social climate, why it's happening, and just give us a basic understanding of what it is and why, right? Just explain why there is now a huge fluidity, transition of gender and sexual identities, whereas 10 years ago this wasn't even a thing. It was basically unheard of, but now we're in this place of acceptance, of understanding, okay, there's more than just what we used to think, which is just the cut and dry black and white man woman, right? And there's so much more than that. So now that I'm doing that, when it comes to this topic in general, because we are in this state of acceptance, we are also in a state of sensitivity. So now when it comes to conversation and topics like this, you have to be careful with your speech and how you talk. to be careful not to offend anyone. So I put a trigger warning at this class to basically indicate that I will not be using comforting language, because I'm not really here to cater to any one person's emotions. Okay, now while that may sound harsh, I want you to have an open mind and an open heart to at least hear me out, because at the end of the day, what I'm saying doesn't truly affect your life unless you allow it to, right? So if you would like to live your life a certain way, you want to identify as you identify, you can do so. You can leave this class. I'm going to bring out, it is going to hurt some people's feelings. I don't know who, I can guess, but some people, okay? But I just wanted to get that out there. So if you know, right now, if you know that you are sensitive, or if you know that certain things, or someone telling you this is the truth of the matter, like saying that, if you know that that is something that's going to get you in an uproar, you know, raise your blood pressure, then you might want to exit the video. But I encourage you to stay, okay? You know, let's just have a good time. Don't take things too personally. Just hear me out and do what you will with the information, okay? So, just want to let that be known. Now, first we're going to be discussing the difference between sex and gender. So when we basically ask the question, basically asking what is God's sex and what is God's gender, are actually two different questions. Okay, so if we are to understand the identity of God, we at first must understand the identity of ourselves. Like, who are we, right? And once we understand who we are, then we understand who God is. And once we understand who God is, then we understand who we are, right? So it really just depends on your spiritual journey and how you go about your discovering process, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and write these things down. So again, I hope you guys brought your notebooks. Again, this is just how we do things. So we'll be dealing with exegetical theology, which of course we'll be reading and analyzing what we read. And then we'll be dealing with metaphysics, basically identity, who we are. And then we'll also be dealing with environmental psychology, which is also the effect of our environment on our consciousness. Okay, so these are the three topics that we'll be diving into today. And like I said, understanding God's gender and sex is two different things. So we have to understand what sex is versus what gender is, right? So sex would be our physical manifestation, right? Gender is our energetic expression. Just to throw it in simple terms to kind of understand. Now, again, when I give definitions, it will most likely not be what you can find on Google. Then what would be the point of me repeating what's on Google? Like, I'll tell you what's on Google, but I'm going to utilize that more so as a comparison than anything, right? So, again, sex is your physical manifestation and gender is your energetic expression. So this is the reason why when it comes to certain people, they will say that you know, sex and gender is different, or my gender does not rely on my genitals or my reproductive organs. This is the reason why they say that, and they focus more so on what they're feeling inside, right? So that's why gender identity is so fluid at this particular point in time. Okay, so dealing with this, I want to ask you, have you guys seen the documentary by Matt Walsh called What is a Woman? And I came across it on TikTok. So on TikTok there was like this there was small snippets of an interview of a guy asking different people like, what is a woman, and their responses were consistent, but it wasn't definitive, if that makes sense. So most people is either they hesitated, or they reversed the question, or they gave an answer in a circle, and they weren't answering. Like, while it was hilarious to watch, it actually made me go on YouTube and look at the full documentary, because I'm like, what is he asking this question for? Why are these people answering like this? Like, what is the purpose of everything? So I went to watch the documentary, and basically, I believe he's asking what is a woman to different people because he's trying to understand the current change in the social climate, and he's also trying to figure out whether it's harmful or not, right? But as of today, what I want to do is I want to bring us back to basics, and I want to be able to answer his question, and basically just give you guys some basic sex education. Now, again, we did get sex education in high school, right? But I do not remember, or I don't believe that they go in depth about who we are as female, male. They just tell you the differences between female and male and the reproductive organs, but they don't tell you what is a female and what is a male. And I think that's what he was asking. Since now that there is more fluidity, it also causes confusion, because this is a new era which we did not yet foresee coming, right? We didn't see it coming. We didn't predict that it could happen. So we're in this era where there's confusion and a demand of acceptance, right? So that's what's happening right now. So I'm going to dive deep into who we are as both sex and gender, okay? You're at home already, but whatever. I'll be telling you to watch a couple of things, actually. Watch okay, so it's on YouTube. Okay, so watch What is a Woman documentary. So go ahead and write that down so you don't forget to watch that. But I do have some other things for you guys to watch as well. And I will reveal why as we go ahead and go into reading. The book we're going to be reading is The Great Red Dragon by Professor Hilton Hotema. Now, this book is, it's not a long book. It's more so like an essay of his findings, okay? So it's an essay of his findings. So this means that he will be referencing a lot of other scientists and things of that nature, and then giving you his analysis or drawing conclusions from what he came across. Okay. A thorough study of humanity is indispensable. The emptiness of scientific data arises from the fact that scientists have never apprehended humanity in its entirety with sufficiently penetrating effort. To learn something of man in past ages requires that we must do more than consider the aspect of him at a certain period of his history and certain conditions of his existence. To know him, we must grasp him in all his stages of development and in all his activities, those that are ordinarily apparent, as well as those that remain potential. Such information can be had only by looking carefully, not only in the present, but in the past. For all the manifestations of his organic and mental powers, also by an examination, both analytic and synthetic, of his constitution and of his physical, chemical, and mental relations with his environment. There is no privileged territory. In the constitution and the construction of the human organism, everything has a meaning. We cannot reach our goal by choosing only those parts that please us, according to what dictates our fancy or our imagination, the scientific and philosophic form of our mind. Because a subject is difficult and obscure, it must not be neglected. Darwin, Huxley, and Wallace, whose discoveries cannot be described in algebraic formulas, were as great scientists as Galileo, Newton, and Einstein. Their discoveries should be as faithfully considered. Darwin, Huxley, and other scientists have shown that the rudimentary organs in man indicate that bisexuality was the primitive, first, or earliest condition of the sexual apparatus or reproductive organs, and that unisexuality is but the result of partial abortion of the other sex. So when he's talking about bisexuality, what he truly means is bi meaning two, okay? Bi meaning two. So two sexes, and unisexuality meaning meaning one sex. So when he's saying bisexuality was first or primitive, he's talking about the original had both expressions of a gender, rather than right now when we are separated and we each have one. So now it's just one man or one woman, basically. That's what he's saying. In other words, man is merely an unbalanced organism by reason of the fact that the male element is hypertrophied while the female element is atrophied. So hypertrophy means larger or outward. Okay, female element meaning atrophied, meaning smaller or within. So he's talking about the genitals. So again, the male is outward and large, and the female is in or retracted or small. Again, penis, clitoris, basically, so you understand the visuals. Okay. Where was I? This view seems to offer a reasonable cause as to the development of two imperfect unisexual organisms from a prior condition of bisexualism. Modern man and woman are both degenerates. Let's get that straight, right? But the fact that woman is still fruitful while man is sterile is conclusive evidence of greater degeneration in the male organism. Were it not for women's productive capacity, the race would end with the end of the present generation. Okay? The capacity of creation is lost in organisms most seriously deteriorated. Man is degenerated to such extent that his organs of fecundity are atrophied and functionless. So again, fecundity is the ability to reproduce. That's what that means. Atrophied and functionless meaning small, retracted, or almost to the point of non-existent. So again, when it comes to reproductive, he doesn't have a womb, which would house a baby. He doesn't have active breasts, which would feed the baby, things like that. You know, he doesn't have a vaginal canal, which would, you know, be the passageway for a soul to come into this world. He doesn't have those things because they are atrophied again. So that's what he's talking about here. His mammary glands, as we have seen, may occasionally develop to an active stage, meaning breast. But his fructiferous glands are unable to engender the child that he might be able to suckle at breast. So fructiferous, meaning to be fruitful, to multiply. He cannot do that on his own. Because he doesn't have the womb. That's the fructiferous gland. Okay? The total extent of his fructiferous capacity is that of the very minor aid which he can render woman in the function of fertilization. Take from him his minor function and he becomes a useless figure. The sexes do not form two distinctive groups. They shade gradually into each other, both physically and both psychically and physically, like daylight to darkness, with the heterosexual woman at one extreme and the heterosexual man at the other. So this is pretty much what they're talking about. So this is the heterosexual woman, right? She is hetero. The man is hetero as well, okay? So this is what he's talking about, being that the heterosexual woman is here and the heterosexual man is here. Now, where we fall on this sliding scale now is all over the place. 10 years ago, people was either here, here, or here, right? But now people could be at any point on this particular line, okay? So again, we have the woman, which is so when we look at Google, right? Google will tell you a man is an adult male human being, a woman is an adult female human being. Very simple, very generic type, answers. And obviously, if Matt Walsh was going around asking what is a woman, it's kind of like, well, obviously those definitions weren't good enough, right? So this is where we are now. And since each person possesses both energetic polarities of gender expression, what defines a man and woman can be determined on their energetic expression, right? So, because people can be born a man or born a woman and they don't feel that way in their lifetime. So that's when sex changes happen and all that other good stuff, right? So we're going to move on. So we're trying to figure out what classifies a woman and a man. If it's not their gender expression, right, then is it their sexual organs, right? Let's check. So does man and woman classify by their sex, if not by their gender? Does biology, reproductive organs, and chromosomal makeup help us identify what a man and woman is? We're going to move on to we're going to jump around to chapter 9, page 31. So now we're in chapter 9. Chapter 9 is called intersexuality. Intersexuality is a condition in which the person is neither male nor female. There are multitudes of these cases. In fact, a condition of intersexuality, both physically and psychically, appears more or less in every person. It is probably that 100% maleness or femaleness does not exist, for in every individual there is some level of the character of the opposite sex. So this is a quote from Your Mysterious Glands, okay? That is a damaging statement against those who hold that there are two sexes and that men and women are distinct types whose sex organs are rigorously made one for the other. It appears that there is one sex, one main trunk with variations in some instances extending in the direction of maleness and in the direction of femaleness in other instances. Otto Weininger, a German genius, in his Sex and Character, a monument of erudition and encyclopedic information, worked out an absolute formula, proving that composite male and female characteristics in varying proportions exist in every individual. Furthermore, medical literature reports numerous cases in which certain individuals, after a careful medical examination, were pronounced female, whereas the opposite condition was later proven. Okay? These records contain evidence to show that sexual differentiation is simply certain variations of one main trunk and not due to the creation of two distinct types. The evidence clearly shows that sexual variation and differentiation are the result of certain degenerative changes, with many individuals representing in a more or less degree both sexes in one body. The last assertion is supported by the research work of biologists. They produce evidence to show that man is really a degenerate woman. The male is, quote, the male is secondary to the male, says Swiney. To be more specific, the male is a malformed female with the cause of such malformation arising from the action of de-evolution. This undeveloped degenerate female is sterile, barren, and unproductive. It cannot create itself nor procreate itself. It must depend for its existence and perpetuation upon the fertile, functional female that unfortunately produced it. When she rises out of her present degeneracy and regains her lost power to reproduce herself absolutely instead of relatively, she will then give birth to no more degenerate, sterile, barren, unproductive offspring, and the degeneration deformed organism that we call male will disappear. So what are some of the things that we're noticing when they're describing what a male is? So these are some things you can write down to kind of identify what a man is, what a woman is as far as sex is concerned, right? So they already established that sex is one. This line right here would be sex in general. It's only one line, right? It's one line, so it's one sex, one main trunk as they call it. Okay, so what are some of the things they put? Undeveloped. See, this is why I said there's a trigger warning, because when it comes to certain adjectives or describing certain things, it's going to like probably trigger some people. Okay. So this is just some of the adjectives that they describe as maleness. So under maleness, you have undeveloped, degenerate, sterile, barren, unproductive. And all of this comes from the fact that its fructiferous glands are atrophied. Okay, so we're going to put here atrophied fructiferous glands. Okay, that's this is what causes all of these to even occur. Okay, so if you ever get this book and read it, it's not like against male again, but it's kind of just giving you the truth of the matter. So that's why I gave the trigger warning in the beginning. Okay, the different types of intersex identities. Okay, now you don't have to really write this down, but just for you guys to kind of understand why utilizing sexual organs is also an insufficient way in which to define maleness or femaleness. Okay, so certain ones would be just like what I expressed in a previous class, androgen insensitivity syndrome, where a woman has the XY chromosome, she has male chromosomal makeup, but her body expresses as a woman. She just does not have a womb. So it really sheds light on what the primordials tended to look like, or what the original degeneration started to look like, because chromosomal makeup obviously isn't sufficient either. So she has high testosterone, she has XY chromosomes, but she has a working vagina, you know, full formed breasts, things like that, things that would, you know, support a child just without a womb. So she doesn't have a womb. Okay, so that's one of them. Okay, they have, whatchamacallit? A phallia, so that is a male without a penis. Okay, so he just has no penis. It's just not there. Then there is hypospadias. So this is where the urethra is below the penis. So it's either coming out of the bottom part of the shaft or just completely under it. So it would be exactly where the urethra is on the female. Almost as if the clitoris grew out to phallic size, right? Grew out to average phallic size, and the urinary tract is exactly where it is. You know what I'm saying? So think about it like that. Then they have congenital adrenal hyperplasia. So this is CAH, which is the excess of metabolic hormones. And it can cause an enlarged clitoris that can be as big as an average penis, or labia as big as a scrotum. So I just mentioned that. But yeah, so if you have seen extra large clitorises before, it can be as big as an average penis. An average penis is about 5 or so inches, 5.5. You know, that's pretty much average. So then they also have a condition called Klinefelter syndrome. Klinefelter syndrome is where a person has an extra X chromosome. So their chromosome makeup would be XXY. So in that particular kind of individual, they would come out looking like a boy. But when it comes to puberty, they basically would not produce any more testosterone, because they are dominated by the X more so than the Y. So they have the Y, but by the time they hit puberty, their phallic growth would be stunted. They wouldn't get hair. They would just be in a rudimentary state for their adult life. Their hormonal makeup would make them look like they're in a rudimentary state the rest of their life. So they would have their childhood size penis as an adult with less hair. Their voice wouldn't get deeper. You know what I'm saying? So as far as all the things that boys go through puberty, they wouldn't necessarily go through that. Okay? And they also have something called micropenis. So that's when the penis is so small. Like, you know what that means. So there's many more. There's many more like different intersexual identities, which they of course call a condition. But it's like, well, you know, you don't want anyone to, again, feel like there's something wrong with them. It's absolutely normal for people to be born in this section, right? So here they would have the optimal version of their bodily functionality, right? A womb, everything, all of the fructiferous glands would be there. This would be no fructiferous glands, and this would be some of them or half of them or any midpoint. You know what I'm saying? Where they would either have a womb, but, you know, or a penis or whatever, right? So they'll have like any variation of a midpoint. Okay, so that's what intersexuality. That's just another thing where it's like, well, that doesn't really help us determine maleness or femaleness, because it, again, is on that sliding scale. And this was something that was identified back in history. So it's not that we didn't know, because Native Americans had their own name for people who were born intersex. Many ancient cultures had their own name, and they basically accepted it. It wasn't a thing. It wasn't like a big thing how it is now today, where it's like, oh my God, like, you know, but it wasn't that way. It was normal. It was either you're a boy, girl, or a, you know, it was three sexes, and people were aware of that, understood that, and that was normal. And I know each culture have their own name. You may remember a Dominican island where young girls turn into boys by puberty. That's also a condition of intersexuality. It's not like a transgender thing. It's more of the hormonal makeup. Like the testosterone does not come in the womb, but it comes later on in life. So they may grow up as